Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to OnPoint and PCM webinar today. We are thrilled to have you with us for Cisco webinar, which is Security Beyond the Firewall. And to present on this topic, we have got Marc Dorn, who is Consultant System Engineer from Cisco Cloud Security. And with him, we have got Dale Long, who is also Consultant Cisco Engineer from Cisco Cloud Security. Before leading into our main presentation, we have got a few housekeeping items. Please remember to enter your questions in the question box on your right-hand side, and I will relay those to our speaker at the end of the presentation today. We do send out a survey at the end of the webinar. Please fill it out and let us know how we did, as well as topic you'd like to see covered in the future. You should see the survey in your inboxes later today. We are also recording this webinar, which will be available for playback the next few days. Recordings are posted to our website, which is www.onpoint.com/webinars and also pcm.com/webinars. You'll also find all the previous webinar recordings there as well. And with that, we are happy to go into our main presentation. I'm happy to hand it off to our main speaker, Marc Dorn and Dale Long. So Dale, I am just giving the presenter right now.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I just want to walk through. We have a few things to cover today. And, we'll start off by discussing, one of the key, critical, widespread, and what does not appear to be stopping, ransomware threat that's out there today. Marc and I are going to go walk through this and give you a preview of what the Cisco ransomware solution is, and specifically around two key components of that ransomware solution: Cisco Umbrella and Cisco AMP for Endpoints, Advanced Malware Protection for Endpoints. So if we watch the evolution of ransomware and how this has kind of evolved over the last 5-10 years or so, what you'll notice here, one thing that was really interesting to me was at the inception of Bitcoin, you see the prevalence of different variants of ransomware being deployed with probably CryptoLocker, Tesla Crypt, and Locky. A lot of these are just variants of these common types of ransomware that's been deployed. And ransomware, if you're not familiar with it, it's very prevalent and business impacting. Just because of the cost. It doesn't really look at it. If we look at it from a crimeware perspective, how many people are paying ransom per month? And the way these criminals, let's call them what they are, really make revenue from these attacks is using relatively small incremental dollars so that they make up their total profit in volume, not necessarily in a huge cost, right? So they won't come to a hospital and say, give us $1 million. They'll say, give us $40,000 or even less, right? $5,000 to expedite the purchasing, the payment via Bitcoin, et cetera, and then just keep doing it over and over and over. But the impact of the organization is much more prevalent, because as you look at it, right, an hour of downtime per se on a database, on a server, on patient admittance, on emergency response systems, it's much higher from an business operational perspective than it is a system perspective. So when we look at the Cisco ransomware defense solution, right, we obviously, plan A, if you will, is to prevent, right? Stop it, prevent it, and detect it when it's in the environment. And plan B, which, not a lot of customers have adopted. Plan B meaning more visibility and control beyond point-in-time protection and detection. Because a lot of companies want to understand, how do we stop this? And if we can't stop it, what's the root cause? What happens after the infection? What happened before? What are the indicators that I know I may be, exposed, et cetera? And that's all part of the solution. So if we look at a typical ransomware inspection and thinking about this chain of events that typically happens, right, the infection vector could be multiple. Email and web, malvertising type attacks, where a user is redirected to a malicious website, and that malicious website redirects again to enable a session that doesn't get rendered in a browser, goes through the, analyzes the system with an exploit kit for vulnerabilities on the system, and then eventually launching communication and control, right, the C2 comms and this key exchange. This communication allows it to contact the bad servers or locations where they can obtain the keys, the configuration files, and then for the particular variant, malware variant of choice or methodology, and then actually encrypt the files with a unique key. And then from there, once that is accomplished, the payload's delivered, it's configured, and it starts encrypting files across the desktop and even attaching the network shares, etc. And if we look at the variants of ransomware, the most common variants, Lockheed, Tesla Crypt, CryptoWall, almost all of them use some type of command and control. What are we talking about, command and control? It's a web URL, it's a DNS lookup. They could be using DGAs, a number of different mechanisms to actually contact the command and control server over the internet to get that unique key for the desktop encryption algorithm. So if we look at this from a network perspective, if we can identify it, those domains, those characteristics, those attributes of those URLs and DNS requests, that gives us one way to identify malicious activity and potentially block it, ideally. And the way we approach this as part of a ransomware solution, and this also goes, and we'll talk about how AMP enables this as well, is we go through this compromised websites or malvertising. They get redirected to an exploit kit domain, which could pop up right inside a browser. It could be, the exploit kit will identify, hey, this user is using Adobe Shockwave. Our landing page for this delivery of the exploit is running Shockwave. So within the browser, take an inventory of what the plugins are on the browser, what type of browser, get a reach to understand what the operating system is, what version of PDF is he running when he opens the attachment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These exploit kits dynamically identify, right, where the vulnerabilities are, and then they launch the exploit at that vulnerability. So from there, once we hit those domains, and it could be done in a different way, and it could be just a simple email attachment, very common way as well. If we look at an email attachment, it could look like a Microsoft Word or Excel document that has an embedded macro. That embedded macro runs a VBA script, which launches PowerShell. And so it's like almost fileless malware, where then it starts making command and control calls via PowerShell, unbeknownst to the user. So there's multiple ways to do this, and the challenge for the end customers is, how do we trace this? How do we get visibility? How do we do the protection? How do we contain? Right? Because you can see it's not just a file that drops on the desktop. It's a multi-factor approach, which is very common across really any type of malware that's being deployed today, or any kit. So to go into a little more detail on how we try to solve this, protect, and enable greater visibility across this, we're going to look a little bit closer at Cisco Umbrella. And my counterpart, Marc, is going to help you introduce your umbrella and the role it plays for protecting the enterprise beyond just malware.
Perfect. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Dale, for that explanation of a big challenge that we are all faced with today. And I agree with you. Long into the future, I don't think Umbrella is, or I don't think that ransomware is going away anytime soon. It's quite a lucrative, profitable business. And we need to have layers of protection to help protect against that. So first layer of protection we're going to talk about is Cisco Umbrella. You on the phone may even know us as OpenDNS. It was a recent acquisition from Cisco, and we add a layer of protection that people don't have today. So one area that Umbrella focuses in on maniacally is the fact that we are trying to predict the future. What our goal is to understand where the infrastructure is being built for criminal activity, and then block those attacks before they're ever launched. And we do that at the DNS layer. Okay? So to explain this really well, I like to really focus in on the anatomy of a cyber attack, how we are looking at security today. And quite frankly, it's pretty simple, right? We've been doing it for 20 years. Is that when there is an attack, there's always a patient zero. And from that point in time, once we know that there is malicious activity happening, either through a file or through a link. We analyze what bad things have happened. We look at the target expansion. We see how widespread this is, and then our security vendors go to work to write signatures and push that out depending on the threat and how widely scaled those attacks are. But in essence, what we are doing is we're being reactive. We wait for the attack to happen, we then analyze it, and then we take corrective action. Umbrella's looking at things a little differently. Malware and ransomware doesn't just happen today, right? It requires quite a bit of work. When you're running a $1 billion a year industry, you need to have good infrastructure built to be able to collect that kind of money. And because of that, what we are doing at the DNS layer, because we are a recursive DNS provider, we see a dramatic number of DNS requests, and we are able to analyze all that data to predict the future. And what we are looking at is, because the infrastructure is being built and the infrastructure requires the criminals to stay ahead of our security stack solutions, they need to register domains, they need to set up IP addresses, they need to spin up servers to launch this attack. And as you saw in a previous slide, DNS is a part of every single ransomware infection at some point in time. Even if it doesn't require a command and control callback necessarily, it's still going to require a DNS request to pay the ransom. So we get a lot of information at that DNS layer to be able to predict that. And then, of course, there is no silver bullets, right? So our security research team is constantly analyzing data for things that we miss so that we can enhance those algorithms in the future. To put it into perspective, where we sit at the DNS layer allows us to cover all ports and protocols and be able to block, especially command and control callbacks, outside the firewall, and we're effective over 92% of the time at those initial DNS requests. So keep this in mind. Today, unless you're an Umbrella customer, you're fighting 100% of your battles at your firewall. Just like your house has a front door, and that's a firewall to your house, and someone knocks on it, that the potential bad actor is standing on your front porch. With Umbrella, we're trying to give the analogy that we're moving your environment into a gated neighborhood. So if you have to check at the guardhouse before you're able to come and knock on my front door. So again, reducing the load on your current infrastructure and your current security stack to be able to add a new first line of defense for all of your devices. Okay, and DNS, pretty simple protocol, right? If you ask for a name, DNS gives you a number. If you ask Umbrella for a name to number resolution, we know what is bad out there proactively, right, predictively. So if it is a safe destination, it's very simple. We do what DNS is supposed to do, is we respond with the right IP address so that you can make that connection, and then your current security stack goes to work. And on the other side of the house, if we know the destination you're requesting is bad, then we don't need to resolve with the IP address. We can just resolve with the IP address of a blocked sites page. And for those instances that a destination is not quite safe, but not already completely bad, it's risky in nature, we can respond with the IP address of our intelligent proxy. And inside that intelligent proxy, we can do additional inspections on the content. Now, what are we doing to predict the future? We are the second largest recursive DNS provider in the world. And we see about 2.5% of all DNS requests around the globe. That equates to almost 100 billion DNS requests every single day from 85 million users, right? And because our infrastructure was built over 10 years ago primarily to provide free content filtering for home users, as well as a very robust recursive DNS service. Many of these users are home users, which is great, because when we are trying to predict the future, we need as much data as we can get, and that data has to be very diverse. So we have lots of corporate customers that we're analyzing these requests and information from as well, but those home users, that is a very unique set of individuals that we get to analyze the data. Okay? And we take these 100 billion DNS requests a day. That equates to about 2 million events every single second. We combine that with 11 billion historical security-related events, and we run these through our statistical models. Right? And this is being done in real time. So we are not in the business of writing signatures. We're in the business of real-time analytics and big data to uncover what a domain is going to be used for in the future. Okay? Some of the interesting ones are the spike rank model, where we can see traffic patterns at major IXPs around the globe. If they look suspicious, then we can run additional analysis on those particular domains based on the traffic patterns. The other area that is really, really cool is the live DGA predictor tool. And that is where we're able to backward engineer these DGA algorithms to predict the random, what appear to be randomly registered domains, and block those before they're ever registered. And I will show you that as an example in our demo here in just a moment. So from an efficacy standpoint, what does Umbrella offer? Well, we are uncovering and discover over 3 million new domains every single day, which allows us to identify over 60,000 new malicious destinations every single day. And then we can block the connections to those destinations over 7 million times a day. Now, we are also a content filter, so these numbers don't include us blocking access to inappropriate websites, which we're doing as well. And we're also just doing what DNS is supposed to do, which is resolving names and numbers. We are the fastest recursive DNS provider in North America. So the Umbrella solution is going to add this first layer of protection to your network without adding any additional complexities to your infrastructure or add any latency or user impact to your users, which is very beneficial to everybody. Okay. So we are very effective in preventing malicious connections from happening from your hosts for all devices on and off the network. And where we're really effective is if in the event that malicious files get into your environment and start to make those command and control callouts, that we're very effective against those command and control callbacks as well. So with that, I am going to jump right into the demo. And one area that I focus in on when we talk about Umbrella is really the ease of use. So our solution is a software as a service solution. So you will just log into a website. There's no boxes to deploy or software to install. And you can come in and get a very good view of your entire infrastructure. So you can see trends over time for connections that are being made to bad areas, and you can also pivot that to a variety of different timetables that meet your interest. You also get to find security events based on identities. So identities can be, depending on your deployment, can be anything from an entire site to specific IP addresses, or we do tie into Active Directory, so users and groups give you information on that right from this dashboard, as well as the domains that are causing a lot of havoc inside of your environment. So you get the visibility into all of the problem children in your environment. You also can see the overall health of your deployment, so making sure that all your sites are are phoning home, we do have a roaming client. I'll show you how we deploy that very easily as well. Make sure all your remote computers are phoning home, and then your virtual appliances, when we talk about Active Directory integration, make sure your entire Umbrella infrastructure is operational and running well. So because it's so easy to deploy, I like to show that. For new users, all you need to do is come in, go to Identities, and then Network, and click a little plus sign. And this is where you're going to enter the information that we need to connect you to our cloud infrastructure. So name your network however you want it. Give us the external IP address of your firewalls, or keep this in mind. Where are we going to see the next DNS request originate from? We do support static and dynamic IP addressing. And if you want an email digest of all the security protections we provided for you over the last 24 hours, you can simply put that in there. If you don't know what the IP address is, we also make that easy. You can simply hit the information sign, and we will show you the IP address that you're originating from. Right? That's just a cool thing that we do. Once you save that, the next DNS request we see, after you change the forwarders on your internal DNS server to us, will be given that new layer of protection. We also protect your network, your devices, when they are off the network. So we do have a roaming client that has to be installed on your systems. And if you are already a Cisco customer and utilizing AnyConnect as your VPN endpoint, that can also be used as our Umbrella agent on those endpoints. So all you would need to do is download a profile, upload that to your firewall, and the next time your users connect, they will be protected. If you're not standardized on AnyConnect, we also have very lightweight roaming clients that you can deploy for Windows and Mac. These are unique to your organization, so you just download one file and distribute that however you are distributing all of your software normally, and you're off and running. Now, what kind of visibility can you get? Reporting is instant, right? You're getting log entries from all your devices within seconds of every DNS request. What can that give you visibility into? Well, first, when we talk about shadow IT, what services are people utilizing? Now, keep in mind, you may have security solutions in place right now that give you some of this visibility for devices that are on-premise or that are connecting through a VPN. But without Umbrella, you will have a blind spot when it comes to what people are doing when they're off your network and the VPN is turned off, which is happening more and more, right? Our research is showing that about 80% of remote users never even turn on a VPN at this point. So having visibility into what services, what Internet of Things devices are being plugged into your network instantly is very powerful visibility. Next, I like to focus in on the top categories. So we are a content filter. We've got 62 categories. We can make sure that you are providing appropriate content for your organization, or block that that is not appropriate for your organization. From a security standpoint, we like to focus in on the activity volume report. And the reason is that from the moment that you implement Umbrella, we are going to stop new malicious connections from happening from your hosts. Okay? And that's great. We can protect you from the time you implement us moving forward. However, every network's been compromised at this point, and what is in your environment today that's making those command and control callbacks, we actually separate that out. So that's going to be a really big bonus when you go to do an implementation of Umbrella. Focus in on what is important, right? It's great that I'm blocking things, but I've got other stuff inside I need to focus in on. So being able to drill down immediately, very quickly into this, see all of the connections to malicious domains, where they're originating from, who is making those requests, is very powerful. Now, this is a canned report, although you can customize these reports to meet your specific needs, which is very nice. Now, what can I do from here? Well, if I see interesting domains that I don't think people should be going to, I can pivot right into that information. I can see how prevalent those requests are in my environment, which is also powerful. But even more powerful is having the ability to compare that to the global community. So as I said, we're processing 100 billion DNS requests for 85 million users. You can compare the traffic from your organization to these malicious destinations to that global community. Okay? In this case, 5% of the requests to this particular domain is originating from my environment. I'd probably want to make that a pretty high priority for remediation. So in the dashboard, I do have the visibility to see the policies that are blocking these requests. I also get a nice report on who it is and what devices are phoning home. So do keep in mind, because we're doing this protection at the DNS layer, we're also protecting Internet of Things devices. So anything that is collecting an IP address that's utilizing DNS, we are adding a layer of protection for. Now, how are we doing this? Right? That is our threat intelligence. So for those most sophisticated, security mature customers out there who need visibility into all of our threat intelligence, we do provide that as well with our Investigate product. It's also a good way to describe how we are protecting you using Umbrella. So all of those algorithms are in this dashboard, and you can see all of the information we know from a DNS perspective about every domain. So we can come in here, you can see all of the requests, you can see all of the static DNS information, right? Domains that are being registered from email addresses who are also registering other malicious domains. We have integrations with other security solutions from Cisco. Right? So we can see that that domain has distributed malicious content. We get geolocation information, etc. One thing I like to point out in our demos is our predictive intelligence. This particular domain was used late last year in a Locky ransomware attack. And since then, right now it's a bit defanged, so there's no IP address associated with this. However, we still have visibility because there are devices out there that are infected with something that are still making DNS requests. So, granted, it's small number, but they're still happening. And I also mentioned that criminal infrastructure is expensive to build, so it will be repurposed for attacks in the future. So this one looks like traffic patterns are changing. But what's really important and really interesting here is that because of our DGA prediction algorithm, we knew that this domain was going to be registered and used in an attack even before it did get registered. And proof for that is that because we have the static information, we can see this domain was registered on July 21st. However, because of our algorithmic technologies, we had put this on our blocked sites list, for lack of a better term, 3 days before that domain was ever registered. So the moment it got registered, nobody could ever connect to that domain if you were an Umbrella customer. Okay? And this is happening in real time, all the time, every day. Okay? Here's another bit of cool information when we see about criminal infrastructure being repurposed. This domain was also used in that same attack. It had similar patterns. It was defanged at one point in time, had no IP address associated with it. We knew it's bad, right? It's distributing malicious files on a regular basis. But about 2 weeks ago, it got assigned a new IP address. So it is being used in a new attack, and our customers all benefit from that predictive intelligence because it will always be on our block sites list. What's also cool is all of the IP addresses that are associated with these attacks as well, right? A domain can be a part of any IP address, but an IP address can also host good and malicious content. So we're not just doing IP reputation. All of our 15 different algorithmic models that are being used are required to make a determination on what is good and what is bad. So with that, I'd just like to focus in on the fact that we are a very easy to implement solution. We have a free trial. Your account managers at PCM can definitely help you get set up with that. And you can try this solution very easily. I will also throw this out there, that our resolvers are free to use, and you can point your forwarders to us at any time. It will give you great availability. So we've had 100% uptime for over 10 years, and we also use smart cache technology. So in the event that an authoritative name server out on the internet ever is unresponsive or not available, your organization's not going to have any impact because of that. We will always respond to a domain with the last known good IP address that we have on record. So in the case of a dying attack that ever happens again, like what happened late last year, our customers are not affected by those attacks. So with that, Dale, I'm going to hand the ball back to you.
All righty. Okay, thanks, Mark. That's a good review. So kind of where we were here a second ago, let me see, I'll minimize this for a second, is Mark kind of just walked through, the benefits and the capabilities of OpenDNS, Umbrella, as part of our overall, one component of our overall ransomware solution. We have ransomware bundles actually predefined and orderable that include Umbrella, AMP for endpoints, as well as AMP on email security appliances from Cisco. So walking through a little bit about AMP for endpoints, what must be understood and what we need to communicate to our security practitioners that are out there today and help them understand is that today, right, the bad guys understand what measures the enterprises are taking to protect themselves, meaning how are they getting in? What tools do they have deployed? The bad guys understand you have antivirus deployed. They understand that you may have data loss prevention deployed. They understand you have firewall deployed. They understand you may be using advanced things like sandboxing, etc. So they devise and constantly morph their capabilities through multi-vector attacks, through new exploit kits, new delivery payloads of malware, using things like sleep techniques, unknown protocols, encrypting the payload, polymorphism, where that payload or exploit is morphing from each individual host within the enterprise to slip by signature-based type technologies. And within, point-in-time protection, if it stops it, great. But given the prevalence and the velocity, the volume and variety of malware and exploits today, it's very difficult, and it becomes a math problem very quickly if you're trying to just build a bigger wall or a deeper moat. So, and what this results in is, you see it all the time in the paper, so to speak, where 65% of the organizations are being the attacks are evading 65% of it using their existing security tools, which, by the way, is your average antivirus effective efficacy rate. Most people can't even determine what caused it, and the average time to detection is 100 days. If you look at one of the most recent disclosed breaches, Yahoo, right? 2014. Is when they traced it back to when the breach initially happened. That's well over 100 days, obviously. So what we're trying to advise our clients and our customers is to take a different perspective, right? Our CTO of our security business group, Marty Resch, who also invented Snort, said, if you knew you were going to be breached, what would you do differently, right? What's your plan B, in other words? Our approach is to look at the entire attack continuum and raise the level of visibility and control before, during, and after a breach or an attack, right? It starts before with good threat intelligence and analytics, point-in-time detection. How do we protect the environment across endpoints, networks, data centers, email, and web? And then wrap it around with a unique capability we have, that's retrospective security, that's enabled by continuous analysis of what's happening on the network, what's happening in our email gateways, what's happening with attachments, what's happening on the endpoints, so that we can dynamically and retroactively, even after something may have gotten through, remediate that dynamically. So within the AMP portfolio, Advanced Malware Protection portfolio, it's everywhere. So if you look at the Cisco security portfolio, you know, across our next-gen firewalls, across our email security appliances, our cloud web security appliances, cloud web security. Within Meraki now is embedded this AMP capability. And all of this, for the very most part, is license subscription enabled, right? So you don't have to purchase a box, so to speak. It's primarily cloud-based. With each one of those AMP-enabled solutions, that includes Threat Grid capability. Threat Grid is our dynamic cloud-based sandboxing, for lack of a better terms, to do dynamic analysis on new threats or threats that we don't already know about, so that we get a complete picture of what does that file do, whether that's a Word document, an executable, a PDF document, etc. What does it actually do if we run it in a virtual environment, and what indicators can we extract from it? How much of a threat is it? That capability is built in with every one of these AMP solutions, meaning there's not even a separate SKU to order it, it just comes with. And we'll talk more about how we scale that from a global perspective. Key to that before is our threat analytics, right? Intelligence is king, context is queen. That's the way I've always approached it. And you talk to some of the top security professionals in the world, they'll probably recite that as well. Talos is our security intelligence group. That threat intelligence is embedded and dynamically updated through the AMP cloud and vis-a-vis through every AMP-enabled component from our security portfolio. Our research and capability is second to none when it comes to security vendors in this space, or in any space for that. But if we just look at our Cisco footprint, right, we see 600 billion daily email messages, which equates to about 1/3 of the world's email traffic. We have 4 global data centers this is hosted at. We see 1.5 million brand new daily malware samples that are out there. So it's a significant footprint. We've been doing this for a long time. It's the same team that actually supports the Snort and ClamAV open source communities and drives this threat intelligence. They do a lot of the big data analytics, the advanced research, and the benefit of that is every customer that's enabled with AMP, and even beyond that as well, because we work with third-party intelligence agencies. They are a resource, and I know for a fact they've been a resource to many federal government agencies when researching threats and responding to threats, takedowns, etc. So as we go through this global threat intelligence powers the AMP Intelligence Cloud. So we have this AMP Cloud concept that every one of our AMP-enabled components can leverage. And I'll talk through a little bit of a scenario there. Give you an idea how this kind of comes together from an AMP perspective. A user with AMP for Endpoints in Stockholm, Sweden, takes a USB stick from a counterpart or a colleague, puts it into their laptop. It looks like a PDF, but it's actually disguised as an executable. The user puts it in his machine. The AMP connector on the machine looks at it, tries to identify if it's bad or not, run through its protection and detection mechanisms, and is quite unsure about whether this is really a bad file or not. Automatically, we can copy that file, take it into the cloud, do dynamic analysis on it with Threat Grid in the cloud, understand if it's threatening. If it is threatening, then we update the AMP Cloud. AMP Cloud gets updated, the enterprise and the connector where that's deployed starts quarantining it. And when we do that and render that disposition, the entire AMP Cloud gets updated. So a totally different customer with AMP running on an email security appliance in Nevada clicks on, tries to download that attachment. Before it's even delivered to that user, it's quarantined by the email security appliance, because the email security appliance looks at that file, checks the end cloud. Have we seen this before? Yes, we have. It's malicious. Don't let the user download it. That's kind of how the whole the AMP cloud, Talos AMP cloud evolves on a daily, round-the-clock, 7/24 basis. On average, we detect 20 to 25% more on a monthly basis than someone like VirusTotal does. And we've got the proof to show that. And again, this is included with every AMP subscription at no additional cost as compared to our competitors. So when I talked about Plan A is protect, what is Plan B? Plan B is deeper visibility and much fine-grained control across the enterprise, and specifically down to the endpoint, where we get the deepest level of visibility, what's happening on these systems when it comes to evolving threats. So what is AMP for Endpoints? It's software as a service, much like OpenDNS. There is nothing, no servers, databases, DMZs to set up in order to facilitate this capability. The admin console is in the cloud. You're rendered a simple HTTPS login page to manage your environment, receive events, etc. It's a lightweight connector, and it can be deployed across Windows, Mac OS X, Linux, and Android systems for mobile. And what we really achieve is, yes, Plan A is prevent, right? Plan A is to protect, but also monitor for evolving threats. Let the enterprise know, hey, we've seen perhaps this file that acts a little bit this way. This document is creating network traffic. This is kind of unusual. This could be a Microsoft Word compromise, for example. We're not 100%. This may be a macro and a natural maple, but we should raise your level of visibility from monitoring. And then respond. We have had an incident. We weren't able to protect ourselves. How do we react? What's the scope? What's the scale? And where do I start? So we cover the gamut from a typical just protect only mode to giving you that deeper level of visibility for monitoring and responding. We have a number of mechanisms we use to block, right? Everybody wants to block, right? Ideally, that's the situation we want to get ourselves in. So we do one-to-one signatures. We do have a signature capability. We also do something called fuzzy fingerprinting, where we'll look at different facets or features of a file to see if it's behaved oddly, or to see if it's similar to other malware authors. For example, to evade a detection, someone might just add a little padding at the end of a portable executable file as a simple example, so that it's not detected by a known signature, right? Well, a lot of the machine learning and analytics is actually done in the Talos cloud. So you'll hear vendors proclaim that, hey, we have artificial intelligence, so you don't need anything else. Well, okay, we've been doing that for a while. We do that in the cloud. We have a huge footprint in the Talos engine that builds these big data decision trees on the fly in the cloud to help us do that. We've relaunched our antivirus detection engine and protection engine within the AMP connector. We've always had this capability, but now we have a much more efficient and scalable way to manage differential updates to that built-in detection engine, so that we can effectively turn that on to enable a higher level of protection. And then finally, we have these are some of the items. There's a couple more protection and detection mechanisms we build in. Things like IOC scanning, things like network analysis, right? So we can, Talos updates the cloud. That one of those sources could be Umbrella. And based on the Umbrella research and threat grid research about known bad domains, we can determine if, hey, that's a bad URL or that's a bad IP address, and alert and block on network traffic as well. Static and dynamic analysis. This is our threat grid capability, which comes with it, right? So if we don't know exactly if that file is nefarious, that's an option that we have. It's included with every AMP subscription to identify what that file is actually doing if it runs in a virtual environment, so we can understand how it may impact the system or see if it's malicious or not. Above and beyond that, to raise the level of vulnerabilities, like we talked about before, these exploit kits, they leverage vulnerabilities in the host. Those vulnerabilities, almost every machine is going to be vulnerable to a certain extent, right? Microsoft Office Suite, the browsers, JavaScript, different versions of these plugins, et cetera, are going to be vulnerable. And not having an awareness, just exposes you to a large degree of different exploit kits. So anytime a vulnerable app, one of those common vulnerable application launches, whether there's an exploit ongoing or not, we raise this visibility to the administrator to say, hey, by the way, you have version 9.2 of Adobe Reader. Here's the vulnerabilities associated with it. Best practices would be to patch this system, upgrade your version of Adobe so that you're not vulnerable to these particular exploit kits. That's kind of a unique capability that we bring forward. It's kind of a proactive measure. And then low prevalence is kind of that solution I talked about before, where if we don't really sure about if that file is malicious, we can blow it up, if you will, in the sandbox in the sky, because threat grid is included with this capability, and it will render a report. It will render a report in the AMP for Endpoint console, which also gives you some remediation options, because the threat grid report will tell you, yep, when we ran this in a virtual environment, here's the behavioral indicators that looks like it ran ransomware, and pull it out in plain English, but also tell you, here's the registry keys it's changing, here's where the file gets installed, here's the command and control calls it's making, here's the network streams that we see outbound from it, and lay all that out. Here's all the processes that get invoked. So if I want to do analysis on other machines that perhaps don't have that connector deployed, or use my other tools to do some type of forensics on it, so I can identify other machines and indicators thereof, it's a huge asset. But we understand that prevention will never be 100% effective. There's other vendors in the world today that will tell you their endpoint will protect everything. Well, people have been saying that for years, and we're still here. But even the industry experts are advising customers from a budget perspective, right? How should we allocate budget when it comes to improving our security posture? It used to be, hey, put 90% of your dollars in a protection mode, right, and 10% in detection. Now you're looking at folks like Gartner's and others, and this is where you're seeing this industry space called enhanced detection and response capabilities come forward. And so even the analysts are telling people to go more to a 60% protection and 40% detection rate, which is essentially where AMP for Endpoint falls in. Why is this visibility and control important? These are some of the questions that a lot of the executives and IT managers want to know, right? Up to the CEO level. What happened? How did it happen? Where did it come from? Who did it come from? What's it doing? How do we stop it, right? And when ransomware hits, these are like instant answers. There's no time for delay. And obviously having this information before something happens gives us much more value and ability to react. So above and beyond what we're capturing, right, we have this capability called retrospective security that's enabled by continuous analysis, because on those connectors, regardless of whether there's an attack or an exploit or malware being deployed, we're constantly analyzing what's happening on that file, because we send metadata to the cloud about features, functions that are happening on that machine, processes that are invoked, network connections that are being made, files that are copied or removed, command line arguments that are being launched from a machine, and we constantly look at that. Because at one point in time, we may not know if something's nefarious. We may see a file or a behavior or an indicator and not sure if that's actually malicious. But as we collect this global intelligence around the clock and do the analytics, do some sandboxing functions, if you will, and identify it, we can determine it. Oh, yes, this was a dropper that preceded a callback to a command and control environment which preceded a delivery of the malware payload. So if we do detect that 4, 6, 8 hours later and make that determination, we can roll back the clock and automatically start quarantining those hosts where we see that dropper file deployed without any administrative intervention, right? So this is pretty unique, and this retrospective capability happens not only across endpoints, but across next-gen firewalls, email security appliances, web security appliances, etc., across the entire AMP infrastructure. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve and what we have proven is, if you look at the average detection time to detection, it's 100 days. With AMP for Endpoints, we've got that down to 13 hours or less. you're going to know whether something happened or not and how to react to it, whether we quarantine it or not, whether we detect it as compromised or quarantine or all the above. It's pretty hard to match in the industry. So with that, let's take a look at how it works. So what you're seeing here is kind of a reworked dashboard to a certain extent for Endpoints. It's a cloud-based. You hit a URL. We actually have 3 implementations of our public cloud, one in North America, one in Europe, and one we just started in Japan for the Asia-Pac region. But it's going to give you a high level of what's happening throughout the environment. If you'll just bear with me a second there. A quick summary review. One thing I haven't talked about is cognitive threat analytics for the sake of time. Basically what that is, that's another detection mechanism that comes with your Endpoint deployment. Cognitive threat analytics, cognitive.cisco.com, does analytics on web proxy logs, specifically Cisco and Blue Code SG web proxies. They take the logs out, they do analytics on it, they can make determinations whether they've seen CNC traffic, have they seen data exfiltration, have they seen malicious malware, known command and control environments, data exfiltration, and characterize it on what's happening across through these web proxies. With the integration, since we purchased Cognitive, anybody who has Endpoints can basically connect, if you will, their web proxies through the Cognitive Analytics Cloud and render that information in the Endpoint console. So as we move through, it gives us a quick, what are the top compromised events types, whether it was a, potential dropper, potential actually executed malware, looking for compromises that are involved in the environment. What are the most common ones? Who's the top hitters? We've developed an inbox type workflow that gives us a snapshot of, okay, out of these systems we think are compromised, what are the highest level indicators and what hosts are involved? So anything that says demo underscore, this is your host name. A quick snapshot of that host, what its operating system is, what the related indicators of compromise may have been, what policy has been applied, what their internal, external IP addresses are, if it's NATed, to give you a quick snapshot of where they are. And then we can start working through this. And if I want to move this to a group that has a much more aggressive policy, just taking this and moving it into like a triage group that has the most aggressive policy for protection would enable me to do so and kind of isolate or take much more aggressive posture on it when it comes to the protection and visibility we're applying to that particular host. So in this, those are a couple of the new tabs related to our dashboard. From there, we also want to know what exactly happened. Help me understand what happened before, during, and after. So if we look at this demo Z-Access host in question here, right, we see this potential dropper infection. Gives you kind of highlight what it means. If I was to look at that and click on it, say, tell me all about this, it drops me into what's called a device trajectory view. This is a view with the indication that's being called out of processes and files that are being invoked around this time frame. And what I mean by time frame is, remember I talked about retrospective? I can move this time frame on this host forwards and backwards to identify what happened before and during, because we're doing this continuous analysis. And so I can move forward to see what events occurred afterwards, this particular indication of compromise, or I can roll it backwards and go look back in time. We hold approximately 30 days worth of trajectory type information for each customer. But when we call this out, the question then becomes, how did this happen, right? We see this indication of compromise, a potential dropper with this particular version of Java, right, that has been compromised. It's because right here at this point, Java created this executable file on the fly. Could be very well an exploit kit, part of an exploit kit, which it commonly is. And we detected it with this name that we attached to it. You'll get all the file information associated with it, whether it was signed certificate, etc. Then the question is, well, who or what, why is using Java? Just prior to that event, we called out another piece of information from a visibility perspective that, hey, your version of Java, this very specific one right here, has these known vulnerabilities associated with it. Right? So now we're raising the level of vulnerabilities. And by the way, you can download a list of vulnerabilities across the enterprise from the console as well. So, okay, well, I've been vulnerable. And you'll notice that this vulnerability was called out even before a known type exploit was created. If I wanted to, if for some reason I was in like audit mode or I wasn't already blacklisting this, I can right-click this particular file and say, you know what, I'm done with it. We're just going to block it and call it good. As soon as I do that, that file is blocked across the entire enterprise, every connector. Question may be, well, what launched it, right? If we follow our timeline backwards, we see Chrome. So this is their browser that makes this outbound connection to this particular, looks like some type of Google query. Then after that outbound connection attempt, we see another one going to this particular IP address over this particular port, and then they land at this particular URL. Once it lands at this particular URL, then stuff starts to get weird. So if I'm looking, to understand, all right, what intelligence do I have? Now I have some intelligence to say, are we seeing this across our web proxies? Are we seeing this across our OpenDNS, or excuse me, Umbrella, sorry Mark, footprint? Do we see this across our web proxies, our next-gen firewalls? Because I may not have connectors deployed everywhere, but I'm getting some strong indications about threats coming from these IP addresses and URLs. Ideally, we catch it here in the spot, right? Every protection detection mechanism wants to protect. But if we're in a point-in-time detection and protection mode, we would never see, if we get a false negative, we won't see the subsequent network traffic. Right, so this could almost be like your phase 2 of ransomware trying to exchange keys, for example. Right, he does a geo-IP lookup because the bad guys want to understand where their footprint is located. Subsequent connections to do DNS lookups to validate he can get either to his domain of choice or just to make sure he's connected to the internet. A couple of more type what look like DNS queries, and then finally they end up at AWS, where another file is downloaded, the actual payload itself. So now I've got hunting information, and even after I download this one, a third file, excuse me, is downloaded with the actual Trojan effect. So, and if I want to understand the scope and scale, in this case I don't think it shows up very well, but if I wanted to understand how many of my other machines have this, we can go to what's called a file trajectory view, which will snap you in. And if there was more than one file, one host, it will be listed out in this trajectory view. In this case, I've only got this one. But if there was 40 different hosts impacted with the same file, I'd have listed out 40 of those hosts, as well as what happened at each host. Was it created here? Was it copied there? Was it moved over here? Was it executed there? Was it open there? Right, with every action within that host and how that proliferated. So I think that's kind of a quick run through. I think we're coming up on a little bit of time. Did we want to take a few questions from here?
Thank you so much, Mark and Dale. Okay, I think we can take a couple of questions. The first question I have from Ton Huang, and from Vincent Remedy. Who is the first largest DNS provider?
Yep, so I'm starting to go through those questions that came through there. So we are number 2. We see a little 2.5% of the DNS requests on the planet. Google is number 1, right? Their numbers are a little easier to remember than ours. But they're only seeing a little over 3% of the DNS requests. They use their intelligence or the information they're gathering to predict the next click. We are utilizing it to actually map out that criminal infrastructure. Good question.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I will take just the last question, and if there are any questions left unanswered, so I will email them to you. The one I'm asking is, does Cisco recommend having any other product running along with AMP on the endpoints? Also, does it protect file servers?
Yeah, so since we've relaunched, our capability here on the endpoint, yeah, there's a number of customers now since we really upgraded our antivirus capability that are very confident and moving forward with it as the quote-unquote one desktop agent. And having said that, understand what those requirements are, right? So when we do antivirus, we basically have a way of managing known threat signatures, right? We don't do things like data loss prevention. We don't do things like, disk encryption, etc. We're focused on the threats, okay? So in that environment, that would be a sweet spot. I mean, if a customer wants all those capabilities of a typical AV suite, well then, yeah, we could either augment that with our enhanced detection and response capability, or if they don't need all those features and functions, yes, be the single kind of connector in the desktop. What was the second part of that question?
Okay.
Oh, does it protect file servers?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, we can be installed on Windows servers, essentially up to Windows 2012. I would watch it on file servers because file servers have a very high I/O, and the way we kind of operate is we don't do a quote-unquote scan typically, a point-in-time scan like a daily or weekly scan. We're watching as files are open, read, open, copied, created, transferred every time we're taking a snapshot of that file. So, and there are ways that we can manage that as well to define, okay, these are the important directories we want to see, and these are the directories that, we're going to trust, so to speak. So yeah, we could do that, and we have done it.
With that, I'll just close the presentation for today. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation,
Sure.
and thank you all for joining us today. Please be sure to check our website at www.onpoint.com/webinars/archive page for the webinar recording. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you again for future webinars. Have a wonderful day, everyone.